Classified files 1944. Above the endless green hell of the Pacific Theater, a hunter circles in silence. Far below, Japanese fighters claw desperately toward the heavens, racing to protect their bomber formations from American attacks. They don't know they're already dead. They don't know a phantom is watching them from above. This phantom wasn't born to kill. He was just a soft-spoken kid from America's heartland. Yet before the war ended, he would claim 40 confirmed kills, an achievement of aerial dominance that stands untouched to this very day. What transformed the most unlikely pilot in American military history into its most lethal aerial warrior? This is the account of the man who couldn't be stopped, the achievement no one has matched, and the harsh reality of what it required to become the deadliest American fighter pilot ever to take to the skies. While Richard Ira Bong was perfecting his aim in the Wisconsin wilderness, the world was descending into chaos. Across Europe, Hitler's armies were steamrolling through sovereign nations. Across the Pacific, Imperial Japan was executing a ruthless expansion across Asia. By 1941, the United States remained neutral, but the storm was approaching fast. Bong, like countless young men of his era, answered the call. He joined the Army Air Force Aviation Cadet Program. His motivation wasn't bloodlust or dreams of medals, it was something purer, an overwhelming passion for flying. His training officers recognized it almost instantly. This young man wasn't just talented, he was exceptional. He didn't merely operate an aircraft, he merged with it. The stick and rudder became extensions of his own nervous system, but raw talent came with a dangerous streak of recklessness. Posted to Hamilton Field in California, Second Lieutenant Bong met the machine that would define his destiny, the P-38 Lightning. It was the most sophisticated fighter aircraft America had produced, and perhaps its most devastating. Bong's reaction was immediate and profound. He didn't just respect the aircraft, he obsessed over it, and that obsession nearly ended everything before it began. The official military documentation, carefully worded and archived in dusty files, describes a sequence of unauthorized aerobatic demonstrations. The sanitized truth conceals something far more audacious. Bong transformed the San Francisco skyline into his personal aerobatics course. He screamed his P-38 down Market Street at rooftop level, close enough that civilians could count the aircraft's rivets. He performed loops around the Golden Gate Bridge, a spectacular and flagrant violation of every regulation imaginable. Was it showboating? Absolutely. But it was also something more. He was exploring boundaries, testing both his capabilities and the Lightning's tolerances. His commanding officer was General George Kenney, a brilliant strategist with zero tolerance for reckless pilots. Kenney commanded the entire 5th Air Force. When Bong stood before him, anticipating permanent grounding, he faced fury incarnate. The reprimand was severe enough to break most officers, but Kenney detected something beyond arrogance in the young pilot. It was absolute confidence, complete mastery. Kenney saw the same thing Bong's instructors had seen, a once-in-a-generation talent. Rather than destroying Bong's career, Kenney made a calculated gamble that would reshape the Pacific Air War. He kept Bong under direct supervision, mandated additional training, and then deployed him where he was needed most. By September 1942, Bong arrived in New Guinea. This was the savage frontier of the war, where American forces struggled desperately to contain Japanese expansion. The enemy pilots waiting for him weren't inexperienced cadets. They were combat veterans with years of experience dating back to 1937. They flew the legendary Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a fighter so maneuverable and proven it could outfly nearly anything the Allies possessed. On paper, a Wisconsin farm boy with minimal combat hours didn't stand a chance, but Bong wasn't flying an ordinary aircraft. He was flying Lockheed's revolutionary creation, designed by the legendary Clarence Kelly Johnson. The P-38 Lightning was genuinely revolutionary. Its distinctive twin-boom configuration, powered by dual Allison engines, delivered remarkable speed and climb performance. But its most lethal feature was its armament configuration: 4 50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. This design was crucial. Wing-mounted weapons required convergence angles, creating a specific kill zone, fire outside that zone, and rounds scattered harmlessly. The P-38's nose-mounted battery, however, projected pure concentrated firepower straight ahead. If a pilot positioned correctly for even a fraction of a second, the result was total devastation. But the Lightning demanded respect. It was unforgiving. Its advanced turbo superchargers were temperamental at high speeds in dives. It suffered from compressibility, a terrifying aerodynamic phenomenon where shock waves locked the controls. sending aircraft into unrecoverable death spirals. Dozens of American pilots had already died just learning the lightning's limits. Japanese pilots, masters of traditional dogfighting, understood Allied tactics perfectly. They would bait American fighters into low-speed turning engagements where the Zero reigned supreme. Americans who accepted that challenge usually died within seconds. Richard Bong refused to turn during his initial combat sorties over Buna, New Guinea. He observed, analyzed, and calculated. He watched Zeros dance through the sky with supernatural agility, and he understood the fundamental truth. He couldn't win their game, so he invented an entirely different one. His tactical doctrine was elegant in its brutality. 1. Exploit the P-38's powerful engines to maintain superior altitude, controlled the high ground absolutely. 2. Convert altitude advantage into kinetic energy through high-speed diving attacks. 3. Deliver the devastating nose-mounted firepower in brief, precisely controlled bursts. 4. Use momentum to immediately climb back to safety. Never linger, never turn, strike and vanish. His mission reports reflected his personality: understated, clinical, ruthlessly efficient. He documented altitude, engagement parameters, and outcomes. What those dry reports couldn't capture was the genius in execution. While other pilots sprayed long, desperate bursts, Bong was methodical. Gun camera analysis conducted by intelligence officers revealed a chilling consistency: patient stalking, careful maneuvering, brief, violent attacks, immediate disengagement. His squadron comrades watched in awe. Major Thomas Lynch, himself a decorated ace, described Bong's approach as surgical. He demonstrated patience, precision, and zero waste. His ammunition efficiency was unprecedented. The foundation was his intuitive mastery of deflection, shooting the complex art of firing, not at a target's current position, but where it would be. Most pilots struggled with this their entire careers. For Bong, it was instinctive. His kill count began climbing steadily, 1 victory, then 2 on a single mission. A bomber eliminated here, a Zero destroyed there. He became a silent specter, materializing from nowhere, striking with surgical precision, disappearing into the sun. Japanese intelligence, analyzing their mounting losses, identified a pattern: devastating high-speed attacks from superior altitude by a twin-tailed devil. They gave the P-38 a name steeped in dread: the fork-tailed devil, and Richard Bong was its most fearsome practitioner. On his personal P-38, he painted his girlfriend's name, Marge. It became an iconic symbol throughout the Pacific: death incarnate for his enemies, hope incarnate for the bomber crews he protected. By early 1943, he achieved ace status. By year's end, his tally was accelerating dramatically, and the quiet farm boy was transforming into a living myth. July 1943, above Lae, New Guinea, the air hung thick with smoke and terror. A massive Japanese bomber formation, protected by a swarm of Zero fighters, thundered toward Allied ground positions. For soldiers cowering in foxholes below, it appeared unstoppable. But high above, invisible in the blinding sun, Bong and his squadron climbed into position for the ambush. This engagement would become a textbook demonstration of Bong's evolving brilliance. He was no longer simply a lone redditor. He was orchestrating aerial violence. Rather than diving immediately, he maintained his flight at superior altitude, forcing Japanese pilots to search upward into solar glare. He waited with predatory patience for the enemy formation to commit to their bombing approach, watching for the instant a bomber exposed vulnerability or a Zero broke defensive position. Then he attacked. The P-38s plummeted like metallic predators. Bong led the assault, his aircraft a blur of velocity and lethal intent. He ignored the agile Zeros entirely. He targeted the bombers directly, the formation's core. 1 precise cannon burst, and a Mitsubishi bomber simply vaporized in a fireball of orange and black. He didn't pause to observe it fall. He was already climbing, converting speed back into altitude, scanning for his next victim. His squadron executed his tactics flawlessly, striking and evaporating, creating chaos throughout the Japanese formation. Enemy pilots couldn't track the faster, more powerful American fighters effectively. The results were catastrophic for the enemy. Multiple aircraft destroyed for minimal Allied casualties. Japanese combat reports from this period convey palpable dread, describing encounters with American fighters attacking with unprecedented speed and precision they couldn't counter. They knew they were being hunted by masters. By November 1943, Richard Bong had achieved 21 confirmed victories. This wasn't merely impressive, it was historic. He was now among America's elite aces, a celebrity in a war desperately needing heroes. General Kenny, ever the perceptive commander, understood symbolism's value. He personally decorated Bong with a Distinguished Service Cross. Then he did something Bong despised. He ordered him stateside. Bong was sent home for a war bond tour. Suddenly, the taciturn pilot who communicated through action was thrust into spotlights. He was paraded before adoring crowds. His face splashed across newspapers coast to coast. America embraced him. He embodied the humble heartland hero who became a dragon slayer, personifying American ingenuity and courage. But Bong was miserable. He detested the ceremonies, speeches, endless handshakes. In letters to Marge, he confessed his heart remained in the Pacific with pilots still fighting and dying. He felt fraudulent, a showpiece while his brothers faced death daily. He relentlessly petitioned General Kenny, practically begging to return to combat. Finally, Kenny acquiesced. By March 1944, Bong was back in New Guinea. A surprise awaited him, a new, upgraded P-38J Lightning. This was a refined killing machine featuring improved engines, enhanced cockpit heating for high-altitude operations, and critically hydraulically boosted ailerons. This innovation dramatically improved high-speed maneuverability, addressing one of the Lightning's significant weaknesses. In Bong's hands, the P-38J wasn't merely a fighter, it was a precision instrument. He returned to a transformed war. Years of brutal attrition had devastated Japanese air forces. Many veteran pilots were dead, replaced by inadequately trained young men. The experience gap had become a canyon. For an American ace like Bong, with hundreds of combat hours, facing these new pilots was often tragically one-sided. His tactical approach continued evolving. He perfected head-on attacks, maneuvers requiring extraordinary nerve. Most pilots broke off early, terrified of collision. Bong held course, locked onto his target, firing until the final possible instant. Closing speeds exceeded 800 miles per hour. The kill window lasted less than a second. Gun camera footage repeatedly shows him flying directly through debris from his destroyed targets. By June 1944, the inevitable occurred. During missions over New Guinea, Bong destroyed his 27th and 28th enemy aircraft. He had surpassed legendary Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 kills. Richard Ira Bong was officially America's greatest living fighter ace. General Kenny was simultaneously proud and terrified. He immediately prohibited Bong from routine combat missions, declaring him too valuable to risk. Bong, he insisted, was a national treasure. His loss would devastate morale catastrophically. Bong was furious. Grounded and frustrated, he argued his place was in combat. Leading his men, a compromise emerged. Kenny permitted him to fly only high-priority missions, only as flight leader where he could direct battles rather than simply fight them. He became a general in the sky. The restrictions didn't slow him whatsoever. Priority missions meant he was deployed precisely where fighting was most intense. The Japanese committed everything defending their precious fuel supplies. The sky exploded into swirling chaos. Bong, leading his P-38 formation, positioned his aircraft with the sun behind them, classic tactics to blind enemies. He led the initial dive, obliterating an enemy fighter instantly. But during his climb out, his aircraft shuddered violently. An enemy fighter had achieved a tail position. Cannon shells shredded his right engine. Warning lights blazed across his instruments. The engine sputtered, ignited, and died. Most pilots would immediately disengage, limping home on one engine. That was intelligent. That was sane. Richard Bong was neither intelligent nor sane in that moment. He was a predator. He feathered the dead propeller, activated fire suppression, and calmly evaluated his situation. He was still airborne. His weapons functioned. Enemies remained in the sky. With his P-38 crippled and trailing smoke, he banked back into combat. On a single engine, performance severely degraded, he hunted down another Japanese fighter and destroyed it. Only then did he turn homeward, nursing his battered aircraft across hundreds of miles of open ocean. When he landed, ground crews were horrified. His P-38 was riddled with damage. An entire engine was destroyed. They declared it combat ineffective, destined for scrap. But they underestimated the bond between pilot and machine. Bong personally supervised repairs. Within weeks, he was flying Marge again. This incident cemented his legend permanently. He wasn't merely skilled. He was indomitable. He wasn't merely an ace. He was unbreakable. His victory count climbed relentlessly toward unprecedented numbers: 35, 36, 38. By December 1944, he had achieved 40 confirmed aerial victories. The number was staggering, an accomplishment so far beyond normal it seemed almost fictional. In the United States, at the highest command levels, a decision was made. General Douglas MacArthur himself issued orders to General Kenney. It was no longer negotiable. Richard Bong was permanently grounded. His war was finished. He was simply too valuable a symbol to lose. America's ace of aces was returning home, whether he accepted it or not. His final combat mission flew on December 17, 1944. It was an uneventful patrol with no enemy contact. Unceremoniously, the combat career of America's most successful fighter pilot in history ended. He returned to the United States, not to the quiet farm he dreamed about, but to a hurricane of national adoration. To a war-weary nation, Richard Bong was more than a pilot. He was an icon of hope, symbolizing the quiet, determined strength that would ultimately achieve victory. He received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest valor recognition. In the Pentagon's hallowed chambers, Secretary of War Henry Stimson placed the medal around his neck. The citation was read aloud, a formal military summary of deeds bordering on unbelievable. It referenced his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at risk of life above and beyond duty's call. It mentioned his unflinching courage, brilliant leadership, and relentless enemy pursuit despite being outnumbered and facing intense opposition. Bong stood characteristically quiet and humble, appearing almost uncomfortable in his decorated uniform. This was a man who communicated through action, not words, who felt more comfortable in a cramped cockpit at 20,000 feet than in rooms full of generals and politicians. After ceremonies concluded, he finally found peace. On February 10, 1945, he married his sweetheart, Marge Vattendahl, in a Superior, Wisconsin church. For one brief moment, American history's deadliest ace was simply a husband, a young man hoping to build a life far from diving aircraft, screams, and cannon fire flashes. The European war was entering its final bloody phase. The global conflict's end finally seemed within reach. What was the genuine secret behind his phenomenal success? How did one man in one specific aircraft achieve a statistically impossible record? The answer lies in converging factors: the man, the machine, and tactical doctrine years ahead of its time. While others were drawn into swirling, close-range dogfights, the romantic duels depicted in cinema, Bong understood this was suicide against the nimble Zero. His system was brutal science. First, energy management. Always maintain energy advantage through superior altitude and speed. The P-38 was a superb high-altitude fighter. Second, positioning. Utilize sun, clouds, and enemy formations to achieve advantageous positions before ever firing. He was a master of patient stalking, sometimes maneuvering extensively to achieve perfect attack angles. Third, concentrated firepower. Exploit the P-38's nose-mounted weapons. He knew if he could align his guns for even a split second, the fight ended. And then there was the aircraft itself. The P-38 Lightning was the perfect instrument for his warfare style. Its twin-engine configuration offered crucial redundancy. It could absorb tremendous damage and still return pilots home, as Bong proved over Borneo. The tricycle landing gear provided stability on rough Pacific Island runways, and its turbo-superchargers delivered high-altitude performance many Japanese fighters couldn't match. In average hands, the P-38 was capable. In Richard Bong's hands, it was historically significant. Letters to Marge revealed the man behind the legend. Terrifyingly powerful new technology was emerging: the jet engine. Richard Bong, master of the piston fighter, was assigned to help usher in the jet age. He was transitioning from one technology generation's pinnacle to the next's very beginning. He was again on the cutting edge, but this time the enemy wasn't a zero in his gun sight. It was the unknown. The P-8 assignment placed Richard Bong at a technological earthquake's epicenter. He who had mastered the most complex piston fighter ever built was again a student. The P-8 was entirely different. No propeller, no torque, just raw, screaming jet thrust. It responded differently. It landed at terrifying speeds. It climbed as if pulled by invisible hands. Every pilot transitioning to jets was genuinely pioneering dangerous, unknown frontiers. Bong, with his innate mechanical feel, adapted quickly. He respected the new aircraft, studying its systems with the same quiet intensity he'd applied to combat tactics. He was no longer a hunter of men, but an explorer of machines, pushing boundaries of what was possible and reporting findings to engineers, literally inventing aviation's future. For several months, this was his new existence. Flight logs, technical debriefings, and the constant high-pitched whine of jet turbines. Then came August 6, 1945. It was a hot, clear California summer day at Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank. For Major Richard Bong, it was routine work. He was scheduled to perform standard acceptance flight on a new production P-80. He completed pre-flight checks, suited up, and climbed into the futuristic machine's cockpit. The canopy sealed shut. The P-80's engine spooled up with characteristic shriek. Bong taxied onto the runway, received clearance, and advanced the throttle. The jet accelerated rapidly, pressing him into his seat, and lifted gracefully into California sky. But moments after takeoff, something failed catastrophically. A primary fuel pump malfunctioned. The engine, starved of fuel, flamed out. Below him, sprawling Los Angeles suburbs stretched to the horizon. He was at critically low altitude with no power in a machine that flew like a brick without its engine. For the man who'd survived 200 combat missions, who'd faced enemy fighter swarms, who'd flown a crippled P-38 home on one engine, this was his final, most desperate battle, a battle against gravity and time. He fought for control. Training kicked in. He attempted emergency restart procedures, but insufficient altitude remained. He tried gliding the powerless aircraft toward the runway, but couldn't make it. In the final fleeting seconds of his life, with ground rushing upward, he made one last decision. He tried bailing out, but it was too late, too low. The P-80 crashed into a field and exploded in a fireball. Major Richard Ira Bong, the ace of aces, the farm boy from Wisconsin, American history's deadliest fighter pilot, was killed instantly. He was 24 years old. On the exact same day, half a world away, an American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay flew high over clear Japanese skies. It opened its bomb bay doors and released a single, strange-looking weapon. That weapon fell toward Hiroshima, and in a blinding flash of light, it erased a city and unleashed the atom's terrifying power. The world changed forever. News of Richard Bong's death, the death of America's greatest war hero, was a minor story buried beneath colossal headlines announcing the atomic age's dawn. In profound and tragic irony, the master of conventional aerial warfare died the very day his type of war became obsolete. 80 years later, Richard Bong's record of 40 confirmed victories remains unbroken. It is a record that will almost certainly stand forever. Modern air combat's sterile affair of radar screens and beyond visual range missiles will never again produce the close quarters, visual range dogfights defining World War II. The era of the gunslinging ace is finished. The true measure of Bong's impact wasn't just 40 enemy aircraft destroyed, it was the bomber crews he shepherded to safety, the ground troops who looked skyward for his protection, and the tactical doctrine he pioneered that saved countless other pilots' lives. His methods became the foundation of American fighter tactics for years afterward. General George Kenney, the man who saw the prodigy behind the rulebreaker, later wrote that Bong was the greatest fighter pilot he ever witnessed. Kenney noted that Bong's incredible success came not from aggression, but from its polar opposite, calm, calculated precision. He made killing appear effortless because he was master of sound, repeatable tactical principles. Today, at the Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center in his home state of Wisconsin, his Medal of Honor rests in quiet display. A restored P-38 bearing the name Marge on its nose stands a silent tribute to the man and his legendary machine. It reminds us of a time when a quiet young man from the Midwest could climb into a fighter plane's cockpit and through sheer talent and discipline, change history. The battlefields where he fought are now quiet. The skies where he dueled are empty. But the record remains etched into military history's annals. 40 victories, 200 missions, one unbreakable legend. The farm boy who became America's deadliest and most untouchable ace.